りおしまい。
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
and your host on the right, Brock,
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. On this episode, we're talking about Dragon Ball, as usual, and in particular, episode 125, which is called Earth's Guardian Emerges, or Interkami? Kami?
Interkami-sama.
Kami-sama, okay, Interkami-sama. Goodness, I'm gonna have to edit that part out. Well, while I'm gonna do that anyways. Fucking Oleg. All right. In the Japanese. So, we will go ahead and continue, but before we do, please, if you like what you hear in the show, give us a like. Subscribe to our channel. We upload new episodes Mondays and Thursdays on YouTube and Tuesdays and Fridays on Rumble, although we will be taking a hiatus soon because I'm moving.
Owl is flying.
I got to fly to a new nest. Got to pick up my little eggs and take them to the new nest. So that'll take some time. And this episode title is not right. Let me go ahead and change that right now. I am amazing.
Not Noibo's secret, no.
All right, so without further ado, we are going to go ahead and start episode 125, Earth's Guardian Emerges. Goku continues to fight against Popo, though the genie just tells him to go home. Goku refuses, determined to save his friends. He resolves to train here until he is strong enough to take on the challenge of Mr. Popo. Meanwhile, back at Kame House, the gang have a conversation about the existence of Kami, questioning whether he really exists or not. Tien is out on the water during this, training to best Goku again at the Tenkaichi Budokai. He looks up and sees Goku in the clouds being held by Yajirobe and taunting him that he will not beat him at the Tenkaichi Budokai. So a couple things here, and because we've already kind of discussed Popo, I think this might go a little quicker than last episode.
Yeah, I think it's evident as we kind of talk about what Popo is testing in Goku, right?
And so, yeah, we don't even see. I mean, he continues to fight a bit, but the real thing here is testing Goku's resolve. And so, Mr. Popo keeps telling him to go home, and Goku says that he won't. He's determined to save his friends, and then he gets the idea, which is kind of this spark of divinity, which is in Goku I mentioned last time, because he gets the idea if he can't at this current time beat Popo, he should not leave, but he should remain one, let's say, one leg in the chaos so that he can integrate this, train, and then one day be able to take on Popo.
Also, Popo does tell him that up here movement is more difficult for people because
Oh,
of
we're gonna
how
get there.
thin the air
No, we're
is.
gonna get there.
Oh, it's in this one
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but the Goku wanting to stick around and train to get stronger to keep challenging Popo would make perfect sense because that's what he generally does. Is he sort of integrates his environment so
Well,
that he can center himself right.
it's good because Goku last episode had an impression that Popo was a demon. Now he starts to see him as some kind of paternal figure. And since Roshi's gone, right, he thinks that he can train with him and find the wisdom of Kami within him and then integrate that. And so just that perspective of seeing him from a demon to seeing him as a potential, which is how he should be seen as a Jin, right? That's he's taken a first step in the right direction. And Popo even congratulates him for this. Or
The
he's like, there's redeeming qualities about you yet. There's something he says like that.
So one thing I want to say about this is that I think specifically Dr. Peterson talks about that idea of ask and ye shall receive is more of an embodied thing. Like, what does it mean to really ask, right? And that's
Mhm.
sort of the challenge that's being placed for Goku here because he's needing to confront the genie and state his wish essentially, and his wish here is that he wants to meet Kami. Now, the test is whether or not Goku really wants to ask that. If he's going to commit himself wholeheartedly to meeting Kami, right?
Mhm.
And so the part of the challenge is that he rises to full commitment.
Well, and he submits himself to the superiority of it, right? Like he's
Right.
not just continually fighting Popo over and over. Now he's trying to adjust to the place that the new unknown that he has discovered in this heavenly realm. Also, I wanted to say I found that quote. Popo says his personality is not bad at all when Goku's like, "I'll train here and get
Mm-hmm.
better and then
Yeah.
one day beat you." And he's like, "Okay." And that's a step in the right direction. So then we go to Kame House and they have a conversation about the existence of Kami. And Oolong does not believe he exists
Naturally.
because being that cynical and immature part of Bulma's masculine psyche.
Yeah. He is the willfully blind little shred of masculinity within Bulma's psyche that looks in the wrong direction, doesn't respect the father, doesn't believe in potential, all of those sorts of things, which is the wrong
He's
orientation, right?
foolish for sure, and so of course he wouldn't believe in this
And I mean,
in Kami, which is
Launch gets really mad at him about it at times too, where he's so doomer about Goku surviving, right? She'll be like, "Do you want him?" It's almost as if he has a will to want it to be that way, right?
right. And see, that's the kind of spirit that we see sometimes take grip of Bulma,
Right.
and that's why it's really a
His
manifestation of it.
persistence is a manifestation of how Bulma doesn't transcend to be like the hero, right?
And so Launch says that we've seen the most evil person, so why not the most good, right?
Mm.
And so Launch coming in here as a voice of wisdom again, coming from that, and it actually foreshadows what we'll see right at the end of this episode. So Launch is excellent there as well, and then it cuts to Tien, who's training in the water, which is interesting, right? His third eye is open. He's training with some like bandages on and stuff, and he sees Goku up in the sky, seeing that he has ascended to that heavenly realm, right?
Right.
Sees him in a cloud.
Goku has ascended in the sense that I think of ascension archetypally, right? Which is that he is an idea that and ideas emanate downward from the heavens.
But his idea is becoming heavenly. The
Right.
idea of the hero is now being lifted such that it's becoming in line with heaven itself.
Right. And so, but because Goku's become such a big idea as well by conquering the greatest demon to try to overthrow the world, he now is sort of like an idea that emanates down and people can emulate. And so it's physically represented here as
Down
that ascension.
through the ancestral spirit,
Exactly.
from the suffering of the Axis Mundi, and down into the sacrificing of one's original innocence. And it's
Right.
like all this hierarchy that builds on
Well, I
itself,
mean,
and
think
it's
of the scene in
brilliant.
The Lion King whenever he's gazing in the
No,
water
that's
and he sees the
exactly it, yeah.
reflection, which is the clouds, and then he sees the
And then
face of
he
his
looks
father,
up,
right?
right? Yeah.
It's very similar because Tien's here in the water with his training. And so
Yes.
that would be where he would see
And he's in
something
that
like this.
reflective state. And what does he see reflected back at him in his unconscious is Goku, which is that driving force that moralizing force that he's getting from Goku, and he's getting nourishment from that the same way that others do when they're around him. And it's to say that Goku is a force for good. Enter Kami-sama there. So I think that's pretty much it for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Covered that not too shabby. So then we get to what you were saying. We're going to talk about this. Back on the lookout, Popo tells a tired Goku that the air is much thinner up here and that he will need to not waste his movements. When Goku asks for guidance, Popo tells him that he must be quiet like the sky, but faster than lightning. Even more confused by this, Popo tells him to clear his mind, prompting our hero to stand blankly. The Jin tells him that thinking nothing is not the same as emptying one's mind. Suddenly, Popo shifts around Goku and says what he is doing without looking at him. To this, Goku is amazed, with Popo telling him that he must see with everything at his disposal, not just his eyes. Kami looks on as the training progresses. So this is all Popo here. And so we start by learning the air is thinner.
Right.
So and that means like the life breath of things, right? There's not as much of that physical tangibility because we are in a realm of heavenly ideas.
Right.
It's interesting that it wasn't said to Goku that the air was thinner in Korin's.
It was.
It was?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is even more
Yeah.
extreme,
He
right?
points out that he
Yeah.
expends too much energy, right? And that's where
Mm-hmm.
the Senzu beans sort of start to show up in that balance.
Yes. But here it's even more extreme than that, right?
This is a further extension of it. And it's mentioned the second time here by Mr. Popo, who is a reflection, I think, of Korin, right?
Mm-hmm. The white cat and the black genie.
Yeah.
I wish we saw them together at ever.
But they can't be together, right?
Well, of course, right.
Because they're polar opposites on each end of that axis mundi.
Right. And so, what was I going to say? That's right. So Goku can't waste his movements here. And that's to say too, right? Like the integration, the ideas and the actions that a person takes become more and more efficient, right? As they become more and more integrated, and they begin to act only in meaningful ways. And that's what Popo is trying to get Goku to do, is only make meaningful movements. Go ahead.
Well, you're right. Specifically in what you're saying is everything must be aligned with its purpose perfectly, right? That's what he's saying. You have to be centered in that sense. Now, there's something really that I just love about this sequence where what Goku is learning from Mr. Popo here is not the same thing that he learned from Korin, but it is an extension of what he learned from Korin. So what he does, right, is whenever Korin tells him that he needs to empty his mind, he imitates Popo, which
Right.
is how he gained his wisdom whenever he was with
Yes.
Korin, right?
He was like, let me just map.
Now, here's the
I will
thing.
map, right?
This is Goku's more primordial way of getting out of his own way. Whenever you're imitating somebody else, you cease to be the lens that you see something through, right? But here, he can't do that anymore because he has to look inward to find emptiness now. It's a completely different thing.
Which is
So there's
why,
a sequencing there.
Yes, which is why the next thing happens, right? Because then Popo basically is like, you need insight as well as your eyes, because he like teleports behind him, and then Goku like scratches his head, and Popo's like, you're scratching your head right now.
Right.
It's like you have to feel the vibrations in the air, and that's another thing, becoming more integrated with the, let's say, chords of being. That allows that sensation to be recognizable. And
Right.
so Popo can understand.
It's sight transcending the self, right?
Yes, it's eyes all around your head without
Yes.
having eyes all around. And even Goku's like, you have eyes in the back of your head? He's like, no, but I do.
But yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why the symbolic manifestation of Marduk, right, has eyes all around his head. But obviously in the physical instantiation, that doesn't exist. You can't actually do that. But you can.
If you can sense somebody's ki, or if you can sense their movements, It's
Or if
like
you
saying
can
that you're operating in a manner in which you do have
if you
eyes
can
around your head.
comprehend their spirit, right?
Right.
Which is what sensing ki is, right? And so um we see that Popo is able to do that, and Goku is amazed by it. I do want to go back though because there's two things I want to mention. Um, he must be quiet like the sky. Having a quiet mind, right, is an important thing for the development of the self. Um,
That's specifically the difference between uh, Goku's original intuition with his instincts and what he needs to do now, right?
with
Which
his
is that
monkey punch.
because the thoughts are continuing when you're imitating somebody,
Mm-hmm.
right? To the whole point of this emptiness is to cease that line of thinking, right? To stop that voice and listen. So silent as the sky is getting into the state where you receive sound because that's what the sky does. The
Well, you
air receives
receive
sound instead of
you're
being the
receptive,
creator, right?
right? Yeah, you're just receptive. And that's what Goku's trying to. He's trying to get Goku to become more open to the integration that he didn't think possible before.
Right.
Because, and that's the thing. We've said this before, and this is like kind of the thing of Dragon Ball. Um, wait. I want to see real quick. Okay, maybe not yet. So we'll get to it, but yeah, emptying your mind is that openness, and being quiet like this guy is having a quiet mind that's not um that is open to the muse and the chaos that flows from the genuine receptiveness, but by meditation, which is very implied here with what Popo does and how Popo acts,
In the
and the
speed,
birds and the speed, yeah, the speed at which it he can.
integrate chaos, right?
Mhm.
I think that's ultimately sort of what that is because whenever you're fully open to all possibilities around you and you're out of your own way, you can see clearly and
Yes.
act much more quickly. Not literally, not just in a physical sense, but when you are in a state of awareness like that, you will be quick to act because you will be aligned.
And that's the thing. Then you become a person that can be relied upon because you are in alignment with the chaos that could possibly happen.
Right.
So, the other thing, faster than lightning, right? He must be quiet like the sky, but faster than lightning. And there's a whole episode called Faster Than Lightning, but
He mentions it here. I think we can save the explanation of that for
yes,
whenever
we see the actual
because it
trial.
is great the way that it
Mhm.
introduces it. So
Um, and we already talked about emptying one's mind. So we already talked about that too. Awesome. So the last thing to mention here is that Kami looks on um with and I don't think do we hear approval or anything.
no,
We just see him looking on. Or what we assume is Kami. Okay. So
I think that
one thing I
he's
didn't mention though, Kami so Goku asks Popo why he didn't come kill King Piccolo for them. And he says Kami has his own affairs to deal with, right?
right.
And we're gonna see later. We'll get back to that later. I just want to mention it now.
Yeah, I think that also Kami watching this entire process is it shows that I think that this is a necessary process and that part of the test is how Goku is responding to the chaos that he inevitably is going to come up against in meeting a spirit like Mr. Popo, right? Because of what he symbolizes. It just, to me, it's very much like this is the test. How you interact, how much of Mr. Popo's mode of being you can integrate into your own understanding determines whether or not you could fathom Kami.
Right. And to be able, yeah, and that is very involved in with openness and the empty mind that has more room for dreams, right?
Exactly.
Which is that head shala?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Um but let's go on cuz we're getting into some good stuff and we're going to have some good stuff at the end, I think as well. So, the next thing we see is somewhere in the forest, Piccolo Jr. is still traveling, having felled a massive bear in the process. The forest rangers inspect the bear and then catch up to him, but he is far too powerful for them. Goku, meanwhile, is trying his best to follow Popo's instructions, but is then told to present the bell Korin gave him. Popo and Goku spar once more with the bell attached to Popo's belt, not making a sound. This reminds our hero about a Roshi training exercise that both Krillin and he failed at. Popo tells him to do the same without the bell making a sound. Couple things here. First, we can see that Piccolo is starting to understand his powers. He kills a bear just because, and then just like walks away and leaves it. And then these two forest rangers come for him. We start to see how Piccolo, because he says like my father has given me great gifts of power or something like that, and we start to see the unholy reverence for the unholy father being developed in Piccolo Jr.
Yeah, and he's sequentially subverting sort of different I don't want to say symbols, but different ideas, right? So we see he comes up against, originally it was the elderly couple that fetched him from the river, right?
Right,
So he
he makes the
subverts,
unholy that baby in the river
yeah.
breeds
So he
all that.
subverts
Yeah.
that. We have the family, the first birthday, or not first birthday, but the first birthday that he's witnessed, right?
Yep.
And he seems like this time is very strange. How fast he's aging and when these experiences happen, right? But the so he experiences the birthday and subverts that and destroys another ritual, right?
Yep.
And then beyond that, what's the next thing we see? The bear.
Mm-hmm.
So he has just killed a bear. So it's it reminds me sort of the beginning of Dragon Ball, where Goku sort of has this relationship with the forest as become as he's dominated it, so that he's not just killing to kill, right? He
Right.
kills to eat. And so he subverts that sort of, okay, Goku coming out of the forest and into civilization, and what's the next thing he sees is the two officers show up and try to stop him with guns. And then what does he do? I think
Crushes one of the guns.
he just crumples a gun. Does
And
he blast the other guy? I can't remember what he
I
does.
think they just both run away,
I
don't
think,
they?
or maybe he just scares him away.
Yeah.
But there's this it's very similar to like Goku, right? Where then once we see
Oh
him,
no, he says, he's like, "Oh, stay away from me," and then he catches all the bullets,
oh, that's right.
and then they run away.
So yeah, it's very similar to what happens whenever Goku's story begins, is Bulma shows up in a car and then shoots a gun at him, right?
Yeah, except he's ready for that malevolence already.
Except it bounces off of him,
Yeah,
right?
he's already ready for it because of what Piccolo has
But Piccolo
instilled in him.
Jr., of
Yeah.
course, doesn't let them hit him. He uses his intellect to stop them.
Much like a Piccolo would.
Right.
Pickles.
But that's that subversion, right? He's
Yeah.
doing the opposite of what is sort of the holy pattern.
Right, and it sets this up well for how this whole arc will play out. But then we get back to the Temple in the Clouds, where Goku and Popo spar again, and this is where the bell comes in. So we saw the bell presented at the very beginning, where Popo's like, "Show me Korin's symbol of approval," right? Really Kami symbol of approval, but right. And there's that. Now we see that Popo can move around without the bell moving, right? He is harmonious, such that he does not cause a disturbance, right? His movements are perfectly aligned such that they don't cause a disturbance of even unintended consequences, which is what the bell is, right? Because when Goku moves, it moves even though he's not trying to move it. It's those unintended consequences.
Well, the bell is not integrated into him,
Mhm.
right? And Popo showing, because I am empty, right? I'm going to take this thing that is not integrated into my body and have full control over it. And
Right,
so
that's
he
what I was gonna.
takes that external thing and integrates it without any issue, right? And it is a question of how integrated you are, I believe.
Well, and it's the more disintegrated you are, the more unintended consequences will arise as an effect.
Right.
Was what I was getting at.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is a representation of that, combined with the fact that in this space, embodiment is secondary to um a higher order of being, how
Right.
you're moving as an
It's
idea.
not just an embodiment, it's like an in
Yeah.
spiritualment, if that's a
Yeah,
not a thing,
it
but right,
is
you know what I
the
mean.
idea thing, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to frame it because I don't feel like I have a word to say specifically what I mean,
It's
but
true, and embodying it was so much of
he's a
what Goku has
transpersonal
done
idea and
before.
he has to move transpersonally in this space. Like that's one way I can say it, but
Mhm.
I don't want to like go down the jargonism that I delved
Sure,
into.
yeah, yeah.
But that idea that Goku is bigger than just his physical instantiation and needs to move as such, right? And so movement doesn't mean the same thing in this space because
Yes.
he needs to be able to.
Well, also, what is the bell? What are bells symbolically? Right, they ring out. One when you move them back and forth, they're used in churches and things like that for a reason. They have one note only as well. And in this instance, every time Goku moves, he's called attention to, and that's to say, every time this a spirit of this level makes a movement, or takes an action, um, any negative consequences that would be would arise from that can be instantly pointed to, right?
Mm.
Unless it's done perfectly, because that calls attention to you as it's tied to you, right? Especially only when you're acting in a disintegrated way.
And then to put it even further, this is an external sort of vestment or an item to be worn that he received from Korin. So it's taking a vestment from Korin and wearing it on yourself as an externalization and being able to integrate it efficiently. And in this sense, integrating the wisdom, which bells generally represent sort of a stroke of wisdom or an enlightenment or
Mm-hmm,
a.
mm-hmm.
That's why it's like the bells of awakening in Dark Souls,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's how well can Goku take this wisdom of externality, which is what he learned through Korin, was that externality. How well can you integrate that? Are you perfectly integrated with that idea such that you could contend with Mr. Popo? Because it is a polar opposite of Mr. Popo that he's trying to symbolically have integrated, right? And Popo can do it because he's emptiness, right?
Mm-hmm. And so he says it's the weirdest thing. It moves even when I don't try to make it move. I
Yeah.
know it's a trick.
Trick,
And
yeah.
that is when Popo's like, you might as well just go
He's like,
home.
okay, well, if that's what you think.
Yes. But let's talk about the Roshi exercise that Roshi's able to do. Move around with the water on his head, right? It's that same idea, being in line with the flow of the universe, such that that those movements don't cause those unintended consequences. Everything you do is intentional. That's how I should have put it.
Right, right. That's a good way
Everything
to
you
put
do
it.
is intentional. And every action you take better be your intention at this level, because if it's not, it's going to be glaringly obvious the flaws that you're making, and that's kind of what the bell
Yeah, yeah, I like that because, and
is.
that's it's sort of, you've heard like the every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. Sort of, there's this idea, and like we put bells on Christmas trees, right, and look up to them up on the tree. There is this sort of, and they're gold generally, right, like the sun. So there's
Hmm.
this thing about
Yeah.
bells where they're sort of like a sonic representation of the sun, and we sort of adorn our cosmic world with them. You know.
Yes. And our spiritual side of that, for sure. Yeah.
And so it's like if you're going to move as a star, right? Because that's what Goku. We've seen him in the sky already
Yes.
in this episode. It's almost to say if you're one of those stars, one
Mm-hmm.
of those bells, one of those sounds emanating from the sun or from above, right? Uh, then you need to move well, right? You need not to have unintended consequences because of how important the idea you represent is.
You
Now that
better
you're,
mean everything you
yeah,
do from now on, right?
it's like the solemn responsibility of Superman, right?
Yeah. 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 And it is because of the power he's attained that this responsibility has to be up to him.
And that's why we're also seeing the opposite, this sort of grappling with responsibility that Piccolo Jr. is like, oh, I have this power that I've. And there,
Might as well just use it to better myself.
well, he specifically keeps looking at his hands, right,
Yes.
as he's doing these things, almost as if he's thinking, how could I do this? Should I do this? But he goes on because that's what he's inherited from his father, right? But it's interesting to see this that every time this happens, like a major spiritual growth for a character happens, there's sort of an opposite that breaks off that you can compare it to.
Especially, yeah. and I think that's um I think it's one of the dualistic parts of the writing that are so meaningful because it grapples with those exact ideas, right? And so, I think let's continue on our last part. Wait, there's one more thing actually, because I don't think we got it. I think at the end of this little set of clips, Goku celebrates because Popo is so strong or something like that. And Popo's like, let this be a lesson that there's always going to be something stronger, right? That is to say that not that, oh, there's always going to be a higher power level out there. It's more what the original meaning of the that idea is we don't know the depth of the human spirit.
Well, shadow integration is never complete, right?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't even say just that. I would say
But
the
as a concept, that's like it's a
it's a
universal
constant.
law,
Well, it's a
right?
process.
Yeah, but
It's
that
not a
idea that it's not a thing to obtain, but it's a process by which you gather from the infinite,
and I
right?
don't know if that's the only way to elevate the human spirit, but I don't want to devolve into that
Sure,
conversation.
but
But what
but
I'm
yeah,
saying is we don't know how elevated the human spirit could possibly become. So Popo basically tells Goku like never think that you're at the top because we don't know the depths of it.
right. When you get to the top, then there's a void
I
that
mean,
you cannot fully integrate.
Popo doesn't even say like we don't understand how high it goes, but he knows the ideal already. He understands the concept.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
but that's what Popo represents, right?
Hmm.
Whenever you're here as sort of the like, it's another dimension of unintegrated
Yes.
unknowns.
Yes. And so now we'll move on. Suddenly, Kami calls out that he will now see Goku. A cutaway to Korin reveals his trick on the poor boy, as the old god steps out looking just like old Piccolo. Goku rushes him, but Kami is far stronger, blasting him away with a flick of his finger. Popo holds him upside down, and Kami tells him of his origins, and then agrees to resurrect the eternal dragon. We have a lot here.
Ooh.
So let's start at the beginning. Korin tricking Goku. Right, this is almost the idea because like Mercury or Hermes is as a trickster god, right? And so he being the kind of the harbinger of these deity type figures, right? Because he's the first one we see, Korin.
Right.
He's obviously a trickster. He does play jokes on characters, and so here he doesn't say that the face of God is the face of the devil as well.
Right. Well, that's the thing about Korin is he's very witty, and it manifests because I think of how orderly he is. Right. He's very quick and like a cat. He has this wit where he'll say one thing to Goku, but Goku won't know the full meaning until later. Right.
He was like, Goku,
It is the way that he
don't
jokes
freak
around.
out.
Yeah, don't freak out when you see him, and oh, he's gonna be in for a surprise.
And then he freaked out. I love how it cuts away to it. Like, remember this? What Korin said?
You said you wouldn't freak out.
And so Goku rushes him right away, showing the reason why the bell won't stop moving. Showing the reason why he can't defeat Popo. He is not open, he's not empty to the idea that the face of God is also the face of the devil.
Right. He considers himself in the picture.
Yeah, and I mean, not only that, but he doesn't understand the duality. He doesn't fully understand the duality of the nature of good and evil. He understands those actions, right? He has taken the ultra divine water, but he doesn't understand. So he understands that incorporates the malice in the world, but he doesn't understand the goodness in the world fully. And so he doesn't expect it to look like the devil, the malevolence that he's been fighting this whole time.
Right, but that's kind of like the Old Testament God, right? Because the devil is sort of born from.
Well, think about Job, right?
Yeah.
They're like almost equal players in that. The devil's like, I'm gonna make this guy forget you, have no faith in you. And God's like, try it.
Let's see.
Yeah.
And then Job suffers
And then Job
suffers
yeah,
and
yeah.
suffers.
And so, yeah, and Goku rushes him because he believes that Kami to be evil because he looks like Piccolo. Because those signals that he's getting are the same from what he got from Piccolo. Like he doesn't he doesn't take the time to take in what Kami is. He doesn't realize that Kami's not aggressive towards him, right? He immediately attacks because of the orientation. It's almost like the heroic spirit and the adversarial spirit cannot exist in the same place in the same time because they're almost like magnets. No, not that's not what I want to say. They're almost like uh energy. What do I want to say? Dark energy and regular matter,
Hmm.
right? They would almost negate each other when they see each
Right.
other. And that's like what Goku does. He's almost like chemically bound or instinctually bound to drive forward and vanquish the spirit of the adversary. And so he charges him, and that's when we get a whole lot of exposition.
One thing that I'm thinking about also with this, his explanation of his origin, which we're about to get into,
Yeah.
is there's this thing about, I think it's a Dante. It's not necessarily just a Dante realization, but I know Dante writes about this, which is that the that there's only love in service of the wrong things, and that's what evil represents, right? It's misplaced attention, misplaced love. So love of the self, love in service of lower things equates to evil, but it's all rooted underneath that in a sort of love, right? And
Mm-hmm.
God, typically people say God is love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's that idea early on in biblical scripture, but we see something very similar in that here, where we're seeing that Piccolo and Kami are built of the same stock, so to speak, right? They're a manifestation of a similar force, and they even look similar with the big circle crest on their chest, right, to represent that they're a big idea, right? Um, but yeah, I think that it's something like that, right? This idea that there is a dualism that you need to grapple with. And if you move properly, it looks one way. And if you move improperly, it goes the other way. And Goku now has to grapple with that sort of
And so
responsibility
let's
of wisdom.
establish what the backstory is. So
Yeah.
Kami's origins. He and Piccolo were once one, and Kami wanted to become Kami because before he wasn't Kami,
And so,
and so the Kami before him, the guardian of the earth before him, deemed him unworthy to be Kami because he had a shred of evil within him.
which
Everything,
was his desire to become Kami.
yeah, and everything that well, I don't want to say everything. That was kind of the same test that we see with Goku, right? Because that spark of unintentionality,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is his intention to become Kami, which should be a pure intention, right? But his real intention is to do it. Well, not real, but part of it. And it doesn't even matter. It can only be part of it. But if only part of it is, the whole thing becomes corrupted.
Well, that I think that is the sticking point, right?
in
Because
this in this realm, right? And there's gray areas in Earth or Purgatorio if we're talking in
Mhm.
Dantaic terms.
Right,
But here everything has to be aligned. And if you want to be Kami, everything you do has to be intentional.
right, and not only that, there's this thing about it where by becoming as God, he creates another entity that's very Luciferian. It's almost to point out the duality inherent in aiming towards God. That there is a good and bad
Mm-hmm.
way of aiming towards the the God force of the world, right?
Right. And it's also another thing that I want to bring up. But let me finish the origins real quick because we
Yeah.
got sidetracked. So Kami and him were the same entity. He was rejected, and so he expelled all of the evil out of him, and that's what became Piccolo. He was able to assume Guardian of the Earth, but Piccolo ravaged the populace on Earth,
Right.
and he couldn't interfere because, as we see, like Kami cannot interfere with it. He's going to say that in a second as well. Um, and so those are his origins, and I want to mention how this is the next hierarchy up of the spiritual father because he does something that almost all spiritual fathers do. He removes the evil of the world, right, temporarily, but it has some pretty bad side effects.
Yeah.
And we see that happen, like, and this is what I was talking about actually in my Diablo stream the other day, is this recurring thing, because what happens, and I didn't show you that part, but in the soul stones, the end of it, basically they hide away evil temporarily, and you saw that Diablo was able to still survive, and they're kind of the progenitors of the civilizations that come after. And so I was talking about that, and I was talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi not telling Luke that Vader was his father. Because if that evil was unleashed on him too early, it would have prevented him from succeeding in his task.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have been able to do it.
People don't really respect that these more old-fashioned stories have a place at the table for all of the sort of um horrors of reality, the
Mm-hmm.
struggle of being, right? It's almost like more postmodern and new stories want to say, well, we're edgy, we're realistic, we represent how the gritty reality of
It's
life.
like you don't, though.
But just putting a microscope in front of it doesn't mean that you're gritty. You know what I mean?
Showing a microcosm, no, because it wouldn't even be a microcosm of it. It would just be like a micro instance of it, a microsecond of it,
Yeah.
a microsecond of it. I think that's a good way to say it. Um, yeah, it's not explaining the same ideas. Like this show explains this experience of the self more than it seems, because it seems like it's not, right? It seems everything is symbolic in the show, and so if you're not looking at it that way, it doesn't seem like that. It seems like it's just all about powering up and fight scenes and the action, and give me more Broly action scenes, Brock.
You may not have noticed it, but your brain did. It's
Exactly.
definitely one of those sorts of things. I think that's what we've been saying throughout the series. Why people love it so much, but can't explain why.
Mm-hmm. Love Dragon Ball.
Because
That
of
is.
how aligned it is with the symbols that you're watching, even if they're parts of gags, right?
Exactly. And so I wanted to say that, and so then Kami splitting himself, it it, it is that almost that blindness that he has, right? He's like, this is how I solve it, and then he can't do anything about it. He can't do anything about the evil that he has like cast down, right? And that's kind of the same idea with God, right? God casts down Satan, but he doesn't prevent him from doing anything after that, right? Satan can still manipulate the mortals in the world,
Right. And Satan is cast down specifically for the sin of trying to essentially say, "Why can't I be God?"
which
Right.
is kind of what Kami's doing. So he's very Luciferian in that way. And but we kind of see what would have happened if Lucifer had subjugated himself to God and said,
It's almost to
or
say that
taken
like
the proper path to it.
that Lucifer split at that moment
Mm-hmm.
into the proper path, which is I think like the Dark Souls 1 path where you take on the mantle of the highest representation that you can and try to embody it,
Yeah.
but didn't attribute it to himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that dichotomy of the self. And that this whole story with Popo that we've just been going through is about the erasure of the self.
Yeah. Becoming empty.
And that's that erasure of the self, which is the desires of the self, is the emptiness that Kami achieved so that he could become a Kami.
Yes. And he has to achieve that emptiness by like and that's the thing, he
By
banishes
sealing
the
away his
shadow,
humanity,
right? The
right? In that
shadow part.
sense.
Yeah, yeah. And but that's the thing. That comes at a price. And I would say like the reason that there's then hell on earth is because um the the splitting of Kami's soul, more or less, comes with that price. Him becoming empty, right? He knows the knowledge of malevolence, right?
Right.
And so that kind of proliferates through the world as he becomes the new guardian. It's almost a new era of that patrilineal guidance from above, and that embodiment that he's doing. We don't know much about the guardian before him, but we will figure out some more lore about it
Right.
at some point.
It's just man, it's just so wild how much Dragon Ball aligns with Dark Souls, right?
Yeah,
It's the exact
yeah,
same
yeah.
story of Gwen and oh, we've got two green guys. One seems to be oriented upward, one's
Too
downward, like
green.
Framp and
Oh,
Calf.
green,
Green guys.
green guy.
Two green guys.
Man, I'm not hearing this right. Apparently,
2 green
Two
snake boys.
Snakos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Green guys, like the 2 green guys in Dragon Ball. Piccolo and
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Kami,
yeah. Ah, I got you, got you, got you.
right?
But
Who are a splitting of, they look similar, they're a splitting of ideas, and if you follow the path of one, follow the path of the self. If you
yes,
follow the path of
yes,
the other
yes,
one,
yes, yes,
you
yes.
follow the path of Kami, where
But
you
this is a
become
more
as Gwen, right?
moralizing story than Dark Souls
Yeah.
because what we see here is a redemption of it, and that's why
This goes beyond Dark
they're
Souls
not
in that
exactly
sense. Yeah.
serpents, and
No,
that's why they're not serpents is because
but they're serpent-like in their appearance
yes,
for a similar reason, though.
yes, yes, yes. I see what you're saying. 2 green guys.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But it is very similar in that sense of become as Kami, right? Become the Kami, like become the All-Father.
Yeah, but I mean, and even in Dragon Ball before, we've seen it go we've seen it be pre-cosmogonic before Dark Souls, and we've seen it this is kind of the instantiation of it, right? This arc, these 2 arcs together, King Piccolo and the 23rd, that's where really the Dark Souls story is coming into play. And yeah, we do see exactly what you said. The path of one creates hell on earth. The path of the other is that self-sacrificing path that Kami has subordinated himself to such that he abandons his humanity and thus awakens the evils of the world.
Yeah, and it's like, you could be like, well, why didn't Gwen come down and help out with these certain situations going on in his kingdom? And it's like, I mean, maybe he had other matters to attend to.
Right, the gaze of heaven is and we see Kami watching Goku, which is the gaze of heaven, right? And it only focuses on things that are worthy of its attention.
Right.
But yeah, and I mean what he says too after that, because he's like, I know what you want. You want me to rebuild the Eternal Dragon. I'll do it, but you have to collect the Dragon Balls, and your people must deal with your affairs as they see fit. And that's exactly it, because Kami, unlike Piccolo, believes in free will. He thinks that he believes that the humans should be left to their devices to choose their path or good or evil. They hope they choose the good path, but Frampt doesn't force you to do it.
No, he just gives you big brain knowledge.
I mean, Kath, if you really want to talk about manipulation, I mean, Kath manipulates you more than that. He tells you a lot of manipulated things, right?
Yeah.
But
it's important that they're different interpretations of the same thing.
It's just natural for hell to become on Earth. Come on.
You know what you should do?
You should wake up Manus.
Should feed on the humanity of
that's
other
the thing. He's
hollows.
already done it once, and then Ulasil is the best evidence. If it wasn't clear from the original game, it's all in Ulasil.
I mean, if it wasn't obvious,
they
from
woke
the
up
Kings.
they woke up that toothy serpent, or they listened to that toothy serpent and woke up Primeval Man.
Woke up Primeval Man.
Yeah, man. So yeah, he says that the people of Earth have to do it on their own. They have to intentionally interact with chaos to receive the wisdom of the universe, such that they can then honestly wish for something to be and manifest it in the world using that wisdom that they've attained.
And that reason is that it's a mode of being that they participate in, which is a higher pattern, not something that for them to have.
Which is why the Dragon Balls and the themes of the show go so well together, because it is that there is no depth to the wisdom either. So they can continually collect your Dragon Balls the same way that there's always going to be someone stronger.
Right, because it has to remain a process.
But we will see how that plays out. I think this is a good place to end it. Unless you have some...
I think just one last thing to point out, which is that I think he explicitly says in this episode, Kami says, I cannot resurrect the dead, but I can recreate the dragon because he is my own creation.
Yes.
And so maybe we should talk a little bit about...
Yes. Okay, so this is something I wanted to say. Because Kami has allowed that potentiality, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what then sets hell on earth, because at the beginning man's not able to handle it. They have to eventually integrate that into their being and then grow from there. But it's because the old Guardian didn't have this manifestation in the world where individuals and the self could interact with the wisdom or with the chaos in the world and receive wisdom from that. That wasn't a process. It was
in a transcendent way,
pre-cosmogonic, in the same way that the stone dragons were there and the arch trees were there. Nothing.
Right. Well,
was
you
happening.
Think about the Dragon Balls turning to stone, right?
Yeah, they were stone
before the stones are given life again.
Mm-hmm. And so yeah, and that's what Kami does, is then he allows that to happen in the world. He releases potentiality on the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's symbolized by the Dragon Balls turning back from stone into literal stars
Yes, stars and
on
like stars
on
in
the
the sky,
ground.
right? They have that enlightenment, and so by doing that, that's when he releases Piccolo there. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and his ability to recreate Shinron is essentially it's a function of him having this dualistic nature that
Yeah,
that you can think of Shinron as sort of a dragon that stretches from heaven to earth. And it's sort of a bridge in a sense, a chaotic bridge that is also uh, he emanates the gifts of the heavens downward, right? And it's lightning
and
striking
we'll see
down when he shows
why.
up,
We'll
right?
see why that he is more superordinate than the last guardian of Earth. We'll
Mm-hmm.
see that much later on, like
That yeah, that's
way
a
later on. But it is important because the story builds on itself like
yeah,
a story should. So I think that's a good place to end off.
yeah.
Uh, if you liked what you heard, please give us a like, subscribe to our channel. We upload new episodes Mondays and Thursdays. We're going to take a hiatus soon. Rumble Tuesdays and Fridays, which should continue. I don't know how much of a downtime we'll have on that. Probably not too much. But this has been Dragon Ball episode 125. Earth's Guardian emerges. It's been Get the Mic. I've been your host on the Left Owl,
I've been your host on the right, Brock.
and we hope you guys have a good night.